All right, Chairman.
We'll call the City of Olivet's Planning and Community Design Commission for January 4th, 2024 in order. Since Brian's not here right now, I'll just to make things easier, I'll call the roll if that's all right.
Yeah.
Member Sam Wallach,
Present.
member Tim Spiegelglass, absent. Member Dan Rosenberg,
Here.
member Laura Ragsdale,
Present.
acting secretary, or I'm sorry, Secretary Brian Lewis, he's absent today. Carol Wagner. Present. And Rob Jergill, present. Let it also be known that our city council liaison, Councilmember Missy Waldman's in attendance, as well as our staff liaisons, Carlos Trejo, Dawn Doty, and Jack Carswell. Appreciate everyone being here. This should be a good meeting. So, Carlos, I don't see anybody in the audience, and I don't really see anybody else online.
See, there are a couple of people online, Chairman.
Oh, there are. Okay, great. Well, then I'll go through the procedures of how we go through. We follow the agenda, and typically we have items that are new business and old business items for actions or petitions that we have to act against or listen, to. But we don't have any for tonight. So tonight's gonna be mainly following, getting an update on the comprehensive plan. We will have time for public comments. I think this should be a time for public comments regarding the comprehensive plan as well, too, Carlos. Wouldn't you agree with that?
If there are any, I mean,
If there are any,
Correct.
yeah, exactly. But, because sometimes when we have public comments with the comprehensive plan or with items that aren't new business or old business, we don't usually call public comments. So we will. All right. And just as a reminder for everybody that's online, we do limit the public comments to no more than 3 minutes. And we do ask you that you, if you do have a public comment, to notify by raising your hand. Should be an icon on your screen. And just keep in mind too, that when you're brought onto the panel to discuss, typically the camera is off and the microphones are off by default. So look for those because we need you to turn those on, both the camera as well as the microphone. And as well, please remember to state your name and address for the record. All right, Carlos, did I miss anything?
no, Chairman, I think you got everything covered.
Good, good, good. So we will do public comments.
Yes, sir.
So
I do have
see-
a couple of people online.
Good, good, good.
That's me.
So if anybody has a public comment related to, well, I guess anything, since we don't really have any new comments or old comments or new business or old business. So if you do, please raise your hand and we will acknowledge you and bring you up onto the commission.
All right, Chairman, I see none.
Seeing none, we'll just move on and we'll go ahead with item 3, Carlos, the public discussion regarding or
No.
preliminary discussion regarding the comprehensive plan update and schedule.
Chairman, as you're aware, we issued an RFP last year, or actually back in 2022. Pardon? We are. Ella?
We are.
Yes, just to make sure, because when it went out, I wasn't sure. An RFQ to update our 2006 comprehensive plan. In there, we hired Shockey Consulting to facilitate that process. In our request in the RFQ, we had said we were updating the 2006 comprehensive plan. We wanted to incorporate provisions for public participation. That participation to be equitable and inclusive in that process. And we also wanted to incorporate the 3 primary sustainability principles, which are social justice, economic justice, and of course, environmental sustainability in part of that process in there. And we wanted, again, a very extensive community engagement process to go through. They did go through that process. I think at our last meeting, I showed you a slide of the amount of participation that took place in there. Back in 2006, when we did our first plan, it wasn't online heavy. and we probably had about 300, comments that we can identify that participated in, whether they were meetings, pop-ups, or at that time when you would mail something tangible in there. Now through this plan, we probably had well over 3,500. We did a lot of extensive pop-ups in there. I think there was at least 8 that I counted in there, from coffee with the mayor to an afternoon at Old Bonham School, a couple of subdivision association meetings, and then various park events and a recreation. I think it's baseball, the first day of baseball, sponsored by all of that here. In that, we also had various surveys, online participations in the public meetings in there. So I think they did a good job. Anyway,
And then we also had the targeted groups too, when we
That is
saw that
correct.
they
Mhm.
weren't.
we had over 12 hours of interviews with specific targeted groups, whether they were renters, Asian Americans, Black and African Americans, businesses, and commercial and residential developers through all that process. And so in that, I want to emphasize the amount of public participation and feedback we received through this process. That public feedback was collated by Shockey Consulting. Then it was shared with the advisory committee primarily, and then also with 2 different meetings with the council and the commission to participate in creating the visioning process, then going back out to the public, and then creating the goals that were again shared with the advisory committee, the council, and the commission, then going back to the public to get input to where we're going to in a couple of weeks, which is the draft plan that they're putting together in there. Meanwhile, the main framework of that draft plan has been posted online through early December. And they are now working on the final draft that we hope to get to you before the January 18th meeting. And at that point, the formal plan will be presented to the commission as a whole. There'll be an opportunity to have a discussion with Shockey Consulting on that, and then an opportunity to begin the public comment process or the public hearing process. That'll be the only thing on the agenda, and there will be no action that would be taken by the commission. And then at your first meeting in February, we'll continue to see how the public hearing comments are coming in. You'd have an opportunity, a couple of weeks, to read through the draft and then determine if the commission is ready to act or continue in that process. So we're looking forward to it. It's been over a year in this process. I think they've done a really good job, especially with the engagement in there, and a really good a gathering of what really is a community vision and the overall community goals in there. It's like I sent out in that email. They're not my goals. They're not your goals. They're really reflect the community goals and values that they want to see incorporated in the next 20 years. And kudos to Shockey for doing that for us in there. So we are at the point where we have what we call the draft framework, and that draft framework includes the overall vision, which you've had a copy of that. There's a shortened version on your dais. And what I'd like to do today is just to make sure the commission understand the chapters of the comprehensive plan, the individual goals A through J, and what those objectives are, and then any comments that you want to provide, or if you have any questions regarding those, we're here to answer those, as we'll go through them A through J one by one. So when we are at the public meeting, the commission has a good understanding of what those goals and objectives are. That gives you an opportunity when you hear the public comments to be able to identify or relate to where they are in those specific chapters and all that. So that's all I have. And if you're set, or there's any questions regarding the process or the schedule, I'll be glad to answer it. And if not, we've prepared a presentation to go over the goals.
Does anybody on the commission have any questions or comments directly to Carlos? Seeing none, Carlos, I did have a quick comment, I've been a part of the process kind of throughout, but I'm curious from the behind the scenes, what's been the most challenging part of pulling something like this together?
I think it's maintaining schedule and providing the resources, whether it's staff time or availability to be out in these opportunities to engage the public. I mean, we've spent several weekends out here. I can't remember, and I was in trouble whether it was my wife's birthday or our anniversary that we were at the Stacy Park opening, and there we recognized the importance of this and was there till about 6 o'clock.
Right.
And there, and I, it wasn't challenging, it was good, but it was a lot of time and effort that we put in along balancing with all the other items and activities. Let the other two chime in terms of what your thoughts are.
Well, and you also have a microphone. I would say that, as far as challenging, making the time, making the extra time in the day, and on top of, staff shortages and things like that, it was just, an extra layer. But I think that the whole process has made us, or at least for me, has made me a better planning professional. And I have appreciated that experience, and I just don't mind so much. However, I was very impressed, that how much staff time we devoted, and how many events that we attended. I myself went to individual subdivision meetings and sat there, being the only person not in their subdivision and not really knowing a whole lot about their issues. And I got to talk with them about how the comprehensive plan is a way to voice, voice their concerns in a way, but also it's important to contribute. I wanted to add on to part of Carlos's what he said already, that the different groups that we met with, the underrepresented groups, those were determined by the first survey. So we looked at the demographics of the respondents and said, well, we've got a whole lot of, people in this age group. We have, this ethnicity, lacking or in excess, and actively went out to get those ideas. Yeah, and I think that you'll see that that interaction reflected very heavily in the plan. I'm
Good.
proud of that. Okay.
Excuse me. For me personally, it was coming into a new plan and not being here from the beginning of it. Just coming straight out of college and going into work, it's been kind of hard to wrap my head around, but I've been loving the process and I've been enjoying the community engagement aspects of it all. And it's just trying to manage it on top of all of the other city work that all of the staff does, which has been a little challenging, but I've loved every second of it. And it's been a great place to just like jump right in and get involved on the comprehensive planning aspect of it all.
Yeah, I agree. And the only other thing that I will add is for my involvement, it was tough to kind of plan long-term, versus, like when we get petitions, it's easy to talk about specific items that you can easily not control, but debate, talk about, and feel like, you have a concrete understanding of what the issues are. With this, it's very broad. And I always felt like that is a challenge to concisely, get those ideas across. And I think you guys have done a great job. And I just can't imagine the amount of wordsmithing that also goes into this, to get those ideas across. So I appreciate everything you guys have done, especially the behind the scenes stuff that we don't see. And so we know after seeing a document like this, there's every page has a lot of effort, a lot of time, and a lot of back and forth. And I know that's a challenge. So kudos to all you guys for sticking it out and keeping on schedule as much as we can. So appreciate it.
All right, Chairman, what we're going to do is we're going to go through each goal. You have a copy of the draft framework along with all the language that's included regarding the vision, the objectives, and the potential community actions. Our goal here is to narrow that down so you have a fundamental understanding of what each of those goals are. Again, we're trying to look at this in the broader picture. And these are very aspirational and and we used these broad words to describe those, but that's what we're striving for. You know, the success of the plan is going to be 20 years down the road, and whoever's in our seats here, you know, noting what was accomplished in that process. We'll also talk, or we would like to engage with the commission questions of how are those incorporated in the, for lack of a better word, in the enforcement. Are they policy? Are they code issues? Are they things that we start to do or look at? And then the plan doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of all plans. It leads to focusing on other plans in that process. So it just doesn't just stop, but it gives us direction with the good feeling that we have strong community support of that direction in there before we engage or go back to the council for more funding or things to look at. So. Yes. All right. So we're going to go one by one in there. The way the plan is composed is that the American Planning Association has some standards for sustainable comprehensive plans, and Shockey has used their outline in that process. So it's not creating a new wheel of any sort or need. We're following a formal professional process regarding those chapters. I believe those are listed here. The way we worked with Shockey, the chapters are kind of color coded with the logo, and that's what you'll see there. So when you see these referenced in the future, we'll be talking, if it was economic development, we may be using a blue font of some sort or thing. So you know where we're getting our information or how it's being implemented in there. Chapter 1 primarily dealt with lost my notes here, was on housing. Chapter 2 was on economic development. Chapter 3 is about diversity, safety, and health. Chapter 4 is environmental. And then chapter 5 is this, redevelopment in there. And those are how those are placed in there. And then within each chapter, there are either one or multiple goals that are referenced through that process in there. So again, we'll go through each one of these and kind of really narrow it down. So you'll have the full text in front of you, and this is what's available on the website. It's all been put public. But our goal is to really narrow it down, focus, and make sure that you have a good understanding of what whether the goal accomplishment is or the objective. So I'm going to run it down to Jack, and he's going to go ahead and start on chapter 1.
So chapter 1 is focusing on the livable built environment, which through the logo and through the comprehensive plan is represented in the orange color. For goal A in short terms is you have the full goal in front of you, but it's to diversify housing, which means within different types and prices. With the objectives, it's prioritizing the maintenance and improvement of housing quality, focusing on housing options that are suitable for aging residents, ensuring affordability for moderate income individuals, explore diverse single family housing options, which includes like villas, attached homes, and smaller condominiums, as well as promoting environmentally friendly and sustainable residential development. And then within those goals, there are different potential community actions from there. And based off of our responses, when we hosted the draft plan open house, and there were survey responses that were posted on, or there was a survey in response for the attendees, and if they looked at the framework, how they could respond. And out of the question of how supportive are you for goal A and its objectives, there were 52 responses, and 31 of those responses were selected as strongly support for goal A. 7 were somewhat support, and then 6 were neutral. And 1 somewhat opposed, and 7 strongly opposed. And then I can go through those comments too if you have any questions regarding the survey responses from the public. But
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Carol.
I have a question, Jack.
yes, Carol,
The-
sorry.
That's okay. Do we address the question about granny flats or granny houses on our lots as a housing affordability or the housing option?
Yes, it's referenced and you should have it within your framework.
Okay.
Now I gave copies out, unfortunately, because you're at home, I didn't have a paper copy sent to you. So
That's okay.
Carol, but yes, in in the handout that I gave at our last meeting, it is referenced as something to take a look at.
Okay,
What are those?
So that would be where you have what we would call, whether it's an accessory structure, whether it's attached to the building or a separate building or entity within itself. So creating a mother-in-law suite, a granny flat,
Oh, yeah.
an independent living quarter within your existing home. And we have several throughout the community already that have been created, even on some of the newer homes, where you have generational families that live within the structure. From the zoning world, especially several years ago, there was a lot of concern, especially having rentals, converting your car to a rental apartment or things like that. But actually, it's been more embraced over time as we look at generational housing, or having whether it's parents or in-laws move in, or having siblings that live on the property too, but somewhat independently. So we've seen that in garage conversions. We've seen that in basements, and they'll put a separate basement door that's independent, so somebody can come in, come out, but still have access upstairs in there. And our code has been pretty good. We used to have some restrictions regarding, like, the only way you could go downstairs is to go through the public living quarter. Those have been flexed over time under our code in there to allow that type of movement or independence space. And there are other things in our code that we'll have to start taking a look at to see if we want to try to facilitate that more.
Pretty good. I think Missy had a comment.
Mine was really just a question of, there were negative reactions to this first question of encouraging high quality homes that are diverse in terms of type and price.
I think it was mainly in response to the intensity of the development of the density that's been occurring,
Okay,
and they're more targeted towards apartments.
okay.
Do you have any of those comments that we could listen to?
I have a couple. They're just pretty similar to what I was saying. But it was just responses of preferring to have, there was a support of having that smaller lot, encouraging smaller lot regulations. But then there were comments, in response to saying, where is it? Last thing Olivet needs is another apartment building and different stuff like that in terms of the density.
Okay.
I would also, I would also say that it was a Likert scale of, whether you strongly agreed and it was all the way to strongly disagree. There's going to be people that disagree, and they, it does skew it a bit, but there's not going to be none.
Exactly. Okay, good.
A couple of things, again, I want the commission to be aware on these as we talk about housing choices. So housing maintenance is that existing housing stock, and how do we ensure that housing stock is sustainable throughout the next 20 years. We have a lot of subdivisions where there is a single carport, and there are code restrictions that prevent the enclosure of that carport because it's too close to a property line or things like that. Again, most people don't want a single carport. They'd like a 2-car plus garage. And again, we have zoning setback issues that prevent, adding or even expanding the carport to allow 2 cars to fit in that process. So over time, it becomes, how do we make these properties more viable to ensure that they don't become tear downs, and that there's continued investment in there. We're in the school district, and the value is always going to go up, but how do you keep the structure itself to keep pace with that value in there? And that's something we're going to have to try to tackle and look at different means to do so. For the most part, we've done okay. We average about 12 tear downs per year. That is not bad compared to the 3,500 houses we have in there. So it's not like it's happening. It's been happening since probably 1980 when Oak Estates experienced that. And if you look at some of the older houses in there, it was because they were carports. Yeah. In there, and in that case, they had no garage. It was a 850 square foot residence without, with just a driveway. And, you know, at some point, the overall, the value increase of whether it was the land or the structure was becoming stagnant. And that's what led to the redevelopment. If the owner is not, you know, putting money back into the property or the maintenance or the upkeep, it becomes, it's trying to find those before they become, you know, there's nothing that it's cheaper to tear it down than it is to redo. And then, you know, and that there's a couple of things, again, there's code wise, and then policy wise, it's, you know, expanding our code enforcement. And that's always a sensitive issue, but how do you do that, you know, in a good, productive way? In there, how do you do that? That's equitable, you know, and that may be that the city is going to have to engage for some housing services or financial services in the process. Right now, we use our community block grant money to do public improvements in there, because given the overall population, we just don't get enough money from the county to invest it in home repairs, because it probably, you know, one house would probably take the whole allotted amount that we get. In there. When you go into housing types and accommodations, again, it's providing a variety of houses and price points in there, making sure that they're accessible for the elderly in there, that they're financially viable for first home buyers, and that they're, but you know, and that there's a variety, and that goes back to the housing options. So you know, you could have townhomes, duplexes. You can have apartments and condos in there, but we may have to be more sensitive in terms of what those densities are in there. And then you get to, you know, sustainable housing. And I think that should apply not just to new construction, but to existing construction, you know, providing the flexibility to put the you know, and the commission's done this, to put solar panels on roofs, whether it's a new house or an old house. Looking at the conduit and all that, so they can have, you know, electric charging stations in their garages, and how that can be done. And other things. We'll have one in February where we'll have our first rooftop solar that will be placed on an accessory structure. Not necessarily that they want the accessory structure, it's just that their home orientation isn't conducive to putting solar panels. So they're going to build, you know, and I don't think it's in the city's aesthetic interest to have like a solar farm layout. So what they're doing is they're building a gazebo, and they're going to put the panels on there. So we'll see what the, you know, how aesthetically that balances. So you know, we'll see how that goes. I'll be coming to the commission in that process. So that's, you know, in the next 20 years, those are the things that we're going to tackle. And those are things that are not going to happen this year or next year. You know, it's going to be 5, 10, 15 processes out. But the goal is to, again, is to diversify the housing types that are available. Now, it's also important to know, in no way does this goal, nor does this plan say that we're going to control the market. That is something that we're going to have to adjust and deal with as it comes in. And, you know, we were talking about the apartments, and we were getting another apartment building. You know, when you build a 200 unit 4-sided building, you know, there are the reasons they go through that and cost, as opposed to building 16 buildings with 4 sides on each that total up to, I'm for it math right now, but you know, 64 different, you know, elevations. It's just, it just, you know, sometimes it doesn't add up in there. And either we have to intervene in the market to engage in that gap, but then we have the school district, we have the council concern in there, or we look at how do we better break up these structures that are popular, that are being built today. So it may be more of an aesthetic way to how to address those. It may be looking at the mass instead of heights, you know, being a little bit more restrictive. But when you're restrictive in the height, that means you got to spread them out. And when you spread them out, we have a very tight corridor. So we'll be balancing or looking at all these things in there. But again, you know, what comes in, you know, the market is always going to dictate. It's how we react to that market and make it more palatable for the community.
What about like neighborhood cleanup programs? Do you think that would be any, you know, benefit?
Yes.
I was also thinking of like workshops, you know, for different
Correct.
people that maybe don't know how to do some home repair, or what they should tackle first, or how they should find a contractor.
And as you go through the potential community actions, they have those, offer workshops. They also talk about doing partnerships with homeowners and neighborhood associations.
Mhm.
And groups. We have several religious institutions in our community that we probably should have more engagement in terms when we have issues of concern regarding the elderly or hoarding and things of that nature, to solicit their support or help, that they could provide. And there are things like that we just never, we've been very fortunate being part of the school district, that the value and the house presence is well kept up, as opposed to some of our neighboring communities where they see a difference in there. But I think we need to start inching closer, providing that process too. So.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on this goal? Let's go on to the next.
So the next goal within chapter 1 is goal B, which is providing a safe and inclusive transportation network. The objectives associated with goal B are enhancing the safety of the transportation network and also making it inclusive for all modes and people. And then within that, and then to break down those objectives, there are just different things in response to with the safety, which is just basing off of like continuing the Olivet Boulevard master plan and reusing that for future plans, and then monitoring major intersection safety, as well as working alongside with different organizations such as Metro and MoDOT for also partnerships with neighborhood municipalities and the subdivision trustees and associations. And then integrating for the inclusive transportation network would be based off of, for examples, would be including the Northeast Quadrant integration, as well as expanding that regional trail connectivity.
How were the comments?
Oh, are there any questions or anything on this goal?
No, I was curious about the public comments,
From the responses, it stood out that the one that was altered when we got responses from Shockey was mainly the housing that had a differential. For all of the goals afterwards, it was mainly strongly support.
mainly strong.
Yep.
Okay, good.
One of the things we did see through this process is and unfortunately, the summer took place when they were improving Dillman Road. And Dillman Road has quite a bit of traffic that's in there. But it was the understanding of the public of whose road is whose in there, whether, there were potholes on Olive, that's not necessarily something the city repairs, or it was the conditions of Dillman Road north of Olive, which were really in bad shape in there. And people, residents that are not necessarily concerned of who owns the road, is just, inquiring that the city needs to do something.
Right.
And not be, not sit back, and whether that's to engage with the other organizations and agencies or and things like that. But I think there's also a process that, to better educate and inform residents on different ownerships and all that. And one of the things, we do a good job to tell people who's got private streets, they're very, very easily, but we could also be doing the same thing in terms of informing how the street system works.
I may have misspoke, but also within in front of you, the goal B, one of the objectives is expanding the opportunities for walking and biking, which would fall under that inclusive transportation network for all people in all modes, but that's what's specifically stated throughout the goal.
Very good. Anyone have any specific questions or comments on this goal? Go ahead.
So most of you know that I used to live in the Northeast Quadrant. And I would walk the Greenway a lot. And I know it's a MoDOT issue for the signals, but if we can look at working with them and increasing the length of time that the crosswalk is on, just because it's really fast, and when you're trying to get a kid, a bike, and anything across, it's really short. And I'm just thinking about for those residents who are gonna want to shop at the new areas, that's gonna be very difficult unless those times are increased. 'Cause
No,
like,
and
so-
those are excellent comments.
Yeah.
And I think, in that and, as you were through, in that area, but I mean, that when we initiated the RFP for the redevelopment that ended up being the Olive Crossing, that those were primary, concerns that the council had wanted to ensure that were part of the agreements to look at that signal time, to get better signal times. And in addition, to get that island in the middle, in there, and given the restraints in there, I wish we could have gotten a little bit wider island, but it beats to what was there before, in that process. And then they improved the crosswalk at Price and Olive, in there, so it's a little bit more visible and identifiable. That Olive is always going to be, our best friend and our worst enemy.
I agree. I totally agree with that. Like, I wouldn't let my son cross over with the other neighborhood kids to go to like Starbucks when it was Starbucks. Just because my husband and I would walk to go down to the Greenway, or we would walk him to Villa Park when he was younger. And it was always just so fast. I'm like, if you guys aren't paying attention, like somebody's gonna get, like, I used to worry that one of them was gonna get hit.
Yeah.
And so,
Scary.
I would never let him go by himself when he was younger, even though all the other neighborhood kids were. And I'm like, nope, sorry. Like, you want to go, I'll walk over and I'll make sure you get across. I don't even have to go in with you, but I want to make sure you guys get across Olive safe.
Yeah, and I think with the refuge island, it's become incrementally better. It's not ideal.
No.
In there, and they also added a lane on each side too, but
Right.
but it's getting there. I think the city is aware of that concern.
Yeah.
And it's noted, whether it was, back then and even now.
Well, and I like the improvement to the crosswalk at the end of Hilltop. It's more visible with the new coloring.
Mhm.
So I think that helps just to alert drivers as well, even though there is an extra lane there now as well. But the coloring significance helps too.
Have you tried using that?
I don't, because I don't live over there now.
I'd be curious. I mean, with your
you know,
experience of
I
what it
will.
was before
Okay,
and
next
now
warm day.
after. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Next warm day. 'cause
Just
I
to
don't wanna be
see
cold.
if we, do we need to push more for
Okay,
that?
I will.
Or has this a good compromise,
Oh,
with it?
I mean, yeah, because we used to do it. I used to use it like every weekend. We would take
Mhm.
the dog and go walk the Greenway. And my husband is a runner, so he would run and he would run over to Shaw Park and then back. But now we, here, and he runs the other way now. So I don't know. So
Very good.
okay, I'll have to do that. I'm going to.
The other issue is getting MoDOT to agree to extend that time. And we've
Right.
had those conversations, and yes, the lanes are wider now, and the development down there and U City means more people. So it means more people are gonna want to use that crosswalk. So it is in my opinion, the collaboration of getting MoDOT to agree that that time needs to be extended. And to me, that's a partnership of city and MoDOT.
Did Great Rivers Greenway have any influence on that? They did. Good, good.
And again, it wasn't there's some victories I think that are worth celebrating, but it's the city engaging with the Great Rivers Greenway to speak on behalf to MoDOT,
Mhm.
because I think they have wider resources, more people, to make that type of things happen. And those are all reflected, they go back to the 2006 plan, in there, and I think they're still within this plan to improve those transportation networks, in there. But, we found, and Chairman Pro Tem has, been here just as long as I have. When they did those improvements, initially at Olive and I-170, their intent was to have a closed highway between Price and Olive. And we advocated that because of the amount of housing and population at Hilltop, that we needed full access and a signalized intersection there. Outside of that, it was that they were going to have to go to Price Road to be able to turn turn left and go eastward in there. So I think MoDOT somewhat reluctantly gave us that signal, but also limited the time in there. But over time, we continued in that discussion, and then using the arms of the GRG or Great Rivers Greenway really helped us improve that and then make that more visible.
Yeah.
I remember when they talked about not having an exit onto Hilltop. And I kept thinking what a disaster that was gonna be.
Yeah.
So,
I remember that because there were some council members that were in agreement with that, and I said, no, that is not feasible. So, yeah, bringing back some harsh realities, but success and the bigger partner, GRG, really is what helped with us as well as the railroad, situation. So, sometimes little cities get snubbed until we get big partners.
Exactly. Okay, should we move on to the next?
In terms of goal C, it's focusing on infrastructure for creating reliable and efficient infrastructure. In terms of the objectives is improving the performance and funding mechanics for the infrastructure, increasing infrastructure resilience in response to extreme weather, and implementing the best stormwater management practices.
And I'm sure everybody was more strongly in agreement with these?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. Very good.
And this one's an interesting one too, because there are things that are within our realm of influence, but infrastructure, while we may say it is a majority are operated by other entities, private and not nonprofit type of entities. So at MSD, you have Ameren, you have Laclede or Spire, and there you have MoDOT and all that. But what this is in essence does is maintains and furthers what we've done before of trying to use the power of influence to get changes, that are outside of our control in there. So it is somewhat interesting, but it makes us to become more advocates in there to have these other agencies change. And then there are some things that we do own, it talks about stormwater management, master plan is one of the objectives of managing stormwater, but to understand, some of these infrastructures, become something that they're not within our realm of control in there, but we can position ourselves to partner or advocate for those type of improvements and make sure. Bruce McGregor has been really good in terms of leveraging when new water lines are being put to create that opportunity to pave a whole road, because they're going to pave half the road, so the city pays the other half for the other half of the road. They did that with Ingle. They've done that with probably about a dozen streets now that have saved taxpayers, half of what those costs would have been in there on, and
That's fantastic.
so that's what this is. Long range. That's the intent. Is the city has to be position itself to be a better advocate in getting those improvements.
I'm familiar with the Deer Creek, group because they directly work with individual, homeowners. Is there anything we could do with them? Like, build water retaining, ponds or, things like that.
There are potential. I know they've worked with several community members or residents here in there. Jonathan Roper was a strong advocate and attended a lot of those meetings. And there, we haven't had the resources to get somebody back in that process, but I think we will over time, especially given the direction the comp plan is giving us in there. And yes, I mean to have a broader discussion of more, instead of isolating these to individual lots, is there an opportunity to create more of a community type of improvement? And we've identified some areas that we feel that could benefit in that, and we started discussions with MSD on some of those things, even going to the extent of, I mean, is it possible to buy a specific property and create a detention area in there, and how do we position ourselves to be in place or be the first in there, knowing that if there is new construction in there, they're going to have a difficult time trying to address, stormwater.
I think those are great ideas.
We've also had workshops that were, not necessarily led by the city, but it's promoting that education and having those opportunities for residents that I think is a real advantage. This goal pushes towards us doing more of that.
I just wasn't sure if like Deer Creek would have a little bit more potential influence or help us work with MSD. You know, if you
Yeah.
could get them nodding their head, supporting us for some of these actions that might position us better.
And when you look at the potential community actions that are noted in there, a lot of those, encourage more participation, of engaging more of that collaborative effort with other agencies and communities in an effort to be known. And it's just like networking. The more people you know,
Yeah.
it's, the better
Making
position
res-
you are.
Yeah, making resources more accessible.
Exactly.
Yeah, especially since they expanded that Deer Creek region for service, and those funds, the grant funds, are available to applicants, and they are encouraging applications to anybody who's interested.
Yeah, I need to look at that.
Same.
Yeah.
I'd also like to note that with goal C, it's just you'll notice that it will relate some of the potential community actions will relate to future goals. For instance, G and I, which G is focusing on safety and I focusing on the environment. So you can see that there's some similarities.
Good. Any other discussion on this, or should we move on? I think we should move on.
So for goal D, it's looking at the quality of services of city services and city facilities. In response to the objectives, it is maintaining citizen satisfaction with city services, enhancing the resident utilization of those city-owned facilities, and then striving to become a leadership within sustainability and aiming and pushing for the community to have influence within within sustainability and leadership.
Any,
So should I?
It was somewhat interesting. Today, we had a meeting with another department where we had the discussion about the dog tags. And we have software that we can tie to our website to collect data. Another department had software where you could collect data to charge a fee. And we were trying to figure out which is the best to try to integrate that service with the least disruption to the customer or our residents in that process. And it was interesting, and it took about 45 minutes to an hour in there to come to a resolution of, who has the most efficient and easiest to use software in that process to do that collection and that distribution in there. And it was pretty interesting, that cross collaboration between the two departments and the different software possibilities. And it's not that, you guys should be using the same thing, or it is that, but their focus and the two focuses and the softwares are for completely different purposes. But we were trying to make shift of something work in there, and then finding that we could utilize something that we could tweak in there, but it's more efficient to do the collection and that interface with the resident than it would be how we were doing it in there. So again, it's how do you best use, the resources that are available for you. And that's what this kind of does. I mean, the goal was, how do we just make it easier for the resident to come in, collect, and leave with their tags in that process. And that's what the core of that discussion was in there. But that is the quality of services. Facilities, I think Olivet has been very fortunate with our residents to provide Class A type of facilities and services like this building, our parks, and all that. And the city has always done it in a very good steward of being, knowing that this is money, this is tax money, from the ballots and all that, and being very efficient and with their use, and making sure like facilities like this have multi-purpose, opportunities to do so. So we could sit here, we could sit up there, or we can have different events that occur here and all that. So
Not even to mention Five Oaks on Warsaw
Mhm.
and all the things that can be done there.
I'm just gonna say, the city has been slow and steady in where we've been going and where we've been moving. It's not been a hustle bustle. And I think that's mindful of the staff, the citizens, you know, all the way around. Some people may say, why is it taking so long down there? Well, sometimes the answer is, you know, we don't always want what we can get. We want what we want. And sometimes you're willing to wait for that and work towards that. And that does take time. I do want to go back to the dog tag issue. Because I had to use it, and it took me forever to get my vet to give me the document to provide. So each year, you know, it was like, how do I pay? And then at the end, I get an email. It says, hey, you've done your stuff on time. Come bring in your money and pay. So in what you converse with today, would whatever you've decided to do, would that allow the individual to pay online when they're doing what we're doing to register our animal? Because for the last 2 years, that has not been possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what, I mean,
Progress.
the end result of discovery in the process is that, you know, it is something that a system should be able to do regardless of the individual. And it was primarily driven by the individual that would use the system. And when those individuals change, or, you know, we have turnover that happens, there's a big disruption as opposed to having that consistency of if in this case, the software should take care of it from that point on, regardless of who that individual or that interactive person is. And the other thing I'll stress too is on the leadership aspect of it, because I think it's very important. I mean, we have, and we've had at least 4 other communities follow our stormwater requirements, our detention requirements, and expand into that. And significantly, you know, Frontenac, Ladue, correct, that have implemented or even copied some of our manuals to provide in that process. Our municipal center here at the city center incorporates a lot of BMP practices, you know, in there, whether it's the permeable pavements, the grass, ornamental grass, and the type of landscaping that's put in place. Well, even further, the stuff that Ms. Knight has done with the parks and recreation facilities and incorporating, you know, Stacy Park being a dark sky, you know, urban area is just phenomenal, given we're like right in the center of an urban, you know, of the county in there, and the other things that have been implemented where whether it's Olivet and Bloom, a lot of plantings and things of that nature. So I think, you know, it's one, again, it's good to know your wins, and that's something that the city's been very successful, and it's good for us to be challenged to even move further in those processes. So kudos to you all.
Kudos to you guys.
Kudos to the citizens.
Yes, yes. Are you guys looking at solar panels on some of these buildings?
Yes, there's actually, the council has funded for the police department. I think they start next week to install solar panels on the carports to supply just electrical for the lighting
Great.
underneath those. So it's you know, it is small steps, but I think that was pretty exciting to see that's going to happen, and it started discussion of where else can they be utilized. Now, some of it too is that they changed some of the funding mechanisms through the state to provide the city some incentives in that process, and that really opens the door much wider
Absolutely.
as when you're kind of restricted to a budget. So.
That would be another education opportunity to connect to resources within the region. Ameren, they've been a lot more aggressive in their energy and sustainability and promoting their programs, and we will become more of a part of that.
That's great. Okay, so we can move on to the
Yeah.
blue.
Yeah, Jack
Go on.
doesn't get to do the whole thing. I do too. No. So economic development, proactively lead economic development efforts to pursue desired businesses. A lot of this is to attract and retain and grow our tax base to support our schools. It's not just a residential community. We do have a thriving business, and industrial, two industrial or like multiple, three large industrial areas that house thousands of jobs. So encouraging workforce diversity here and within those businesses is a part of this goal. Any questions?
Well, I mean, I feel like what's changed with this goal compared to what it was before?
I would say this builds off of the 5-year economic development plan, but has a research component to it to do more analysis of what is lacking, to figure out which businesses are our desired businesses.
Mhm.
I have lots of vision where that this comes in, and I don't want to, start rubbing my hands here. But leveraging our position, our proximity to 39 North, our proximity to the interstates, the airport, you really cannot get a better location from a transportation standpoint. We are so very perfectly centered in that respect. So if you have a transportation business, or I mean, like, this is a great this is a great area.
And close proximity to Clayton too, the downtown
Yes.
Clayton.
Yeah.
When you look at what those, prices are going for office space, and I mean, this
Absolutely.
area, it would be a prime location to be close by, still, be able to use those types of services. And
Now, similar to the way that the apartments are benefiting from being between WashU and Danforth, or 39 North in general, I feel like our office space is that it is in there as well, that we can attract those businesses that can no longer afford the Clayton office market or downtown. We have about an average, or like in terms of like our stock, quality stock of office space. A big part of this goal is to have a better relationship with the property management and owners of those businesses to make sure that they are keeping up their properties, that they are, well managed, well, um, of course, I can't,
desirable locations.
exactly, exactly. We can be a bigger part of that engagement, so.
Chairman?
Go ahead, Carol.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, Don, I'm really, really glad to see that when we talk about economic development, we're not just talking about retail development, which is the kind of common usage that the word often is used as, particularly to the general public. I think it's important that we all make note of that distinction.
Good point, Carol.
Yep.
Anybody else have any comments?
For
Sam?
attracting businesses, we're talking about incentives. Does that primarily mean some sort of tax break? Are there other types of incentives that we use to lure attractive businesses?
So I am not, I do not mean incentives necessarily. Now if I'm thinking of incentives, I want to know about the building and what they need. What is, cause it's, incentives are used to, to fill the gap, in their financial analysis. Why can they not afford this building? But they need to locate there. So as far as we can look at our incentives to see how we can fill, what gaps are out there. The research would be under this goal, I believe. However, as far as like attracting, our location and availabilities within our retail, I cannot imagine that those are easy to find. And there are site location websites like Location One that are actually provided by the state. So we can help promote those locations and not be in the incentive.
Understood. Thank you.
I think there are other component into that too. I mean, this, as compared to the 2006 plan, uses the term proactive. And what we've been slowly trying to transition the community from since 2000 is to become less reactive and more proactive in there. And it's difficult. It's difficult given the community of our size, the corridor, and the values in there. So the whole goal through this process is, if based on the community comments that we've heard, is that they want us to be more proactive. There are certain types of uses and users that they would like to see along that corridor or in the industrial parks in there. And in the next 20 years, for us to be out there, trying to get these things done. And I am a firm believer, that incentives doesn't mean that you're trying to fill a gap. I mean, call it what it is. Incentives is trying to encourage or get something that you want and put yourself in the table and be an equal partner in that process. And that's the way we've kind of utilized it in the city. It does have a bad name or in a different view, but if you're trying to if there is a specific support for some type of use, and that the market isn't bringing that use here, is you need to jump in the water and figure out why and how to get it in, and whether it is trying to fill a gap or it's trying to subsidize is maybe the right word to get them to be within our local market. And if you're going to do that, then we're going to sit at the table with you, and you're also going to do these things in there. And that's how we've enhanced a lot of our corridor, our public spaces. And there we've started to get into the process of curating actual tenants, and we've done that work well with Olive Crossing, and there to get a grocery store and how that was put in place, or through the Oliver to have a retail, a food establishment component, beside that will be soon up and coming. We did the same thing with Easy Storage, where the council, in their agreement said you have to have a high sales tax type of generator. And hopefully within as they're nearing completion, they're actively working with different retailers, and if all goes well, we'll see something coming up by April in there that should be exciting. We got Plant Haven and what they've done in the process and in there. So some of it is a balancing act, and but then you get these other things like the Firestone. We started a process to try to assemble 3 different properties there at that corner, and it was difficult. Everybody had a view of what their value was and then finally one of those properties said, I can't wait, I'm just going to sell, and they sold in there. But we pushed them to build a facility that was more in line with what our design guidelines were. You may not like the building, but it does look better than the buildings that we've had in the past, timekeepers or things of that nature. We improved the veterans fountain area in there. So it's how do we position ourselves in this to sit down and engage. For Firestone, it was we owned a little strip of land that they needed to make this work well, and it was utility easement really that it became. They could have done the building without it, but we were able to engage, get them some right of way, and do the improvements to Veterans Fountain. Unfortunately, with Olivet and Bloom, I mean, they really made that a really spectacular spot and they're above and beyond what we could sit in the permitting process. So I think that's some of it. I mean, it's always not that pretty part of it, but I think that it would gives me more confidence to go out there, position somebody or pursue someone with the confidence that you come here, I think, more than I think, there is community support for this, how do we make it work? And if it takes that, then what are we going to get out of that? In there? And I feel more confident going to the council, saying that, so yeah, something may need some type of incentive to make this work, in there, and that there, through all the planning process, there's strong support for this type of user or things like that. And then there are other things, of course, I would say, no, in there, but I think you have to balance it. I think the whole goal here is, we can't just wait and see what the market brings in that process.
Oh, and just to expand a little bit on the goal itself, there are one part of our one potential outcome was a revolving loan fund to assist with small business improvements, sort of like the facade improvement plan that St. Louis City has. And there are opportunities to engage with the economic development community at large, like small business, not just SCORE, but there is a small business representative that can actually meet and give presentations, seminars for small businesses that are in the community, and talk about funding that's available there. There are lots of ways, that are, and I didn't mean to be so prickly on the incentives thing.
I didn't take it that way.
Okay, good. I think you did.
Oh, no.
But no, but it's an opportunity to be out and proactive, I think, is our main word there, is to not be content sitting on the sidelines and letting the market happen. We are at the will of the market, of course, in many ways. However, we can, throw our thumb on the scale and get the best out of those developments for the city.
The more developments we do, the better we get.
It seems like we do have the magic with encouraging those developments to make their improvements, and it's just working its way along.
Mhm.
Very
Good.
proud of us for that.
Okay, let's move on to goal E.
That was goal
Oh,
E.
that was goal E,
And this
so
is, the next
goal
one is
F.
goal F. To ensure that we are a welcoming city and to celebrate the diversity of our residents, businesses, and visitors. A big part of this goal is to preserve our diversity and kind of extol the virtues of that diversity, and give those connections to their ethnic and national upbringings. So creating that dynamic sense of place was a big part of the 06 plan, and this is a continuation or furthering of that goal. We saw through the community engagement that we are not reaching out to our minorities efficiently. Our Asian contingent was, in our first survey, was so very low. It was concerningly low. And that was one of the first and best attended focus group meetings that we had. So I know that I have this feeling, and it was echoed back to us in the survey results that they are out there and they have opinions. To this goal will, some of the potential outcomes are to translate more of our materials, display international flags in public spaces, and public artwork. I think that one is a good one. So, but culturally and ethnically unique events. Five Oaks on Warson has many of those events already in its repertoire, and I believe that they are full steam, as those are what are most interested in using the space.
Good.
So it's a wonderful start on this already.
Good, good. Yeah,
Please.
go ahead, Missy.
So I'm gonna do what I thought Rob would do. So what, the Asian community was the largest subgroup that came in.
I wouldn't say largest. I may have.
Okay, okay. So I'm curious as to, what did you really hear from them about being a part of this community? Was there anything that stood out with regards to their thoughts of being here or improving beyond, conversations and doing things in their language, so that they know what's going on?
I think that was the most important one that
That was?
they kind of emphasized was the methods of communication.
Okay.
And one of the, discussions in that is that the Asian community within itself is extremely diverse. I mean, it's from the Indian Ocean all the way to the East China Sea, so we're talking about, different individuals, different languages, even within the same common area in there, and how best to communicate. They gave us some tips and advice on different, organizations or papers to use, and then also having that discussion of how some of the senior members view government based on their experience before they migrated here. In there that, typically government isn't out to help. It's generally there to take in there, and it was getting a better understanding. It was helpful, like from our code enforcement process in there. How do how do you make an approach where there is a barrier with communication, and then there's also a view that no, you're with the government that's generally not good. When our goal is primarily to see how we can help and get something addressed.
I found, because we have a large Asian population in my subdivision, when I would be saying you have a right to be a part of the subdivision, and I want to know what you think. Their answers to me was, well, I'm not a U.S. citizen. And so, they think just because they're not a U.S. citizen, yet they own their home and they live in this community, that they have no, I guess, say so, or right to have input. And that was something that I had to reach out to the folks in my own subdivision, say, no, 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 that's not true. You're a landowner, you're a homeowner, you're a resident in this community. So I just didn't know if that was part of, some of the stuff that you heard that, I don't think I'm, I can be a part of this because I'm not a citizen.
I think it was somewhat implied that, again, they didn't feel like they were to be part of that, whether it's through a commission, any governmental process, or just being approached meant that it was a negative as opposed to something positive in there. And
Or
then
that
it was
they-
unique to see that within the groups themselves, regarding, the age difference of, it seemed like the younger generation was more embraced and active in the process, especially with the schools, than the more senior members, which again, just, may have just had a bad experience of how it was, prior.
Were they also reluctant to know if their opinions would be heard? Versus kind of like that government just controls things without taking any input from everybody. So,
I wouldn't say that they stated that specifically, but that's the overall sentiment I think that we kind of came out with. It's like, one is like, wow, you're asking us, and two, it is, again, there seems to be like this age gap of distrust. The older, the more you distrust that the government, that anything that's associated in the process that's government oriented in this. So whether it's applying for a permit or coming in uh, in there, or if you got the letter from all of that saying that there's a meeting coming up, it's like, oh, I'm not gonna open that, or I'm not gonna take a look at that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that's, none of my anecdotal, or observational references would have to do with the Asian population, or it would be, it's definitely people are reprehensive when it comes to taking a survey. And I don't think that they felt that if they had a disagreement, that they should state it. And I'm like, well, but this is your platform to do so. So, no, I wouldn't say, I would say that the trust factor may have been harder to overcome. I think that it's interesting, that there's just populations that are not going to be receptive to our traditional methods of communication. And discovering what that is, I don't think that that is sussed out yet, discovering how to communicate, what to communicate, what is the most interesting information, that all needs to be discovered.
The language issue is going to be a complete challenge, just like you said, with all the different languages. I know at like apartment complexes, it's extremely difficult to post, things to defer those different languages. So what kind of advice did they give you?
Some of the advice and some of the things, again, there's good wins that the city has had, being especially implemented by Parks and Recreation and Ms. Knight, have been on the wayfinding and using, graphics instead of in lieu of words, to know where a bathroom is, or where the activity is in there. That's been pretty neat to see to progress as they took that into account with Five Oaks and also with the parks in there. As I was there today, again, we were having that discussion on the dog tags. I saw on her calendar, they have a pre-planning meeting next week already for Holy Fest. And again, that's a neat thing. And I think that's more towards like early spring or late winter, but that's already becoming, that they're already making preparations, and that's in the process of that. And that's been one of the bigger events that takes place in Stacy Park. It's kind of neat in there to hear what goes on and all that. So
Typically in March, and that's a celebration of colors, and it's fun. If you haven't been, it's fun. And yes, the stuff washes out, so. yeah.
Mr.
Chairman,
Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
so I just wanted to point out that in most countries, government is something to be suspicious of. It is not your friend. That's nothing new. And so for our immigrant community to be suspicious of our local government is certainly to be expected, not a surprise. And that makes it difficult, but part of it is teaching them that we're government and we really are here to help. We're not the evil people. We're not going to throw you in jail. We're not going to conscript your kids. It's the government is a positive, not a negative. And that's a big part of teaching immigrants how to assimilate into our community.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good point. And especially as volatile politics are today, I think sometimes it depends on what area you live in.
Yeah.
Right.
I think there's also one point about the diversity is I had this discussion with Paul, who is our code enforcement officer, and we were talking about how their education can go a long way with just within city staff of learning the different customs throughout different ethnicities. For instance, when he goes on inspections, and I don't want to be incorrect, but I think he stated that within Vietnamese tradition, it's accustomed to give a gift when you are exiting the home, and within the different boundaries of how to, not take in the gift for ethical reasons, but also not disrespect their culture, is learning that and educating the staff about how to handle those situations as well.
Yeah. Interesting.
in homes that have to have their shoes where they have to remove their shoes, or that the female cannot be, in a room alone with a male, unless they're related to them, or they have to have their father in the room at all times. And it's just an education for our staff that would, it stems a lot of misunderstandings.
Absolutely. Very
Or
good points.
at least that's what our code enforcement officer is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions about this one?
This isn't really a question, but just a comment. I'm happy to see proactively recruiting representatives from unrepresented groups to city boards and commissions. I think that will sort of beget a lot of other actions that we couldn't possibly even think of right now on this list. Happy to see that included here.
All right, good. Let's move on to the next goal.
Public safety. We want to be safe. That's it. I'm joking. I'm absolutely, no, I'm kid, but,
Just trying to move the meeting along.
right. But to, decrease crime, but enhance the feeling of safety throughout the community. Maintain our high quality public services and increase resilience, pardon me, to severe weather events. This speaks to preparedness and training of the general public and our resident population to prepare for severe weather events, to prepare for safety. To have plans in place. So it's primarily education, outreach, communication, and building those relationships with the community. So,
Yeah,
okay.
one of the things, again, as that realm, what you have influence over, in there, but the police and fire play a major role in our review process in there. And there is a formal, it's called CPTED, and that's crime prevention through environmental design. And we follow that routinely in there, and it's making sure that spaces are, where your eyes are your best defense, and that we're minimizing, areas of where it could get dark or you could get concerned in there. And we applied a lot of those techniques as we worked with the crossing, which was a good, significant size development. Ensure that there's public spaces, that they're visible from the street, and you can get all eyes in there, and that the police and fire feel safe and comfortable with that. Fire, works hand in hand with my department in terms because of the fire safety and access issues. So they'll look at, not just the site plan, but then they're also within the building interiors and all that. So it's an interesting process in terms of and looking at and gathering their perspectives in there. And I think it's been more accepted by the profession, the planning profession, in terms of the guidance and guidelines to follow through in there as it was in the past. There are still some things they need to improve, but we still work with them. And that being like, do you really need a 22-foot wide road, in there? But there's purposes and reasons for that. And again, safety is always first and foremost.
And I think it's interesting with the presentation we had on the light intensity, talking about the shadows and everything. I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand with it. I was curious, did the police department or fire department ever see that presentation or have any input in their thoughts on that?
We had discussions at the department meeting level about the presentation, that. I mean, best of my knowledge, there was no opposition to that, and I think it's something that even given with the recommendations of the plan that we'll be furthering and addressing down the road.
Yeah, good.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
So, over here I see something about, extreme weather and, around the power lines. So like trimming trees and stuff like that, you know, I don't even know if burying power lines in new developments is accepted as better than, you know, above ground anymore, but I'm just kind of curious if that conversation would take place for a goal like this. I mean, we've got a, like, if we've got a large development or large redevelopment, you know, would it make sense to have them bury the power lines? So we don't have to worry about trimming the trees.
Oh, can you use your mic?
So, I'm gonna answer that in two ways. When Tammy and I rehabbed the house, it was over in Indian Trails. That's exactly what we did. We buried the electrical wires under the ground. My question always was, what happens if there's a problem with the electric, is it impacted under the ground? But this was something that we had serious discussions with Doug Cohn on with regard to the development across the street. We really would have liked to have seen that, but my understanding is that cost to do that was just
Outrageous.
outrageous. And so, as the city looks to try to do certain things, it's like, well, can we incentivize? You want to use that word, incentivize? That's even impossible for us to say, well, we'll incentivize it because it was so expensive. And in today's world, from my understanding of yesterday's world, things like what Ameren used to do, they don't do anymore. You're privately paying for it now. So that's a hard
Yeah.
one.
I mean, it just seems crazy that they would be okay, like Ameren would be okay with spending the money to send crews out here to fix that kind of, there's just the labor for the maintenance. How could that, over the life cycle of the power lines, how could that still justify that that initial cost? That's where I'm coming from. But again, I don't know.
And it's one thing to bury the lines from the main distribution to the property, but you still have to deal with the distribution lines that
Right.
run behind all the properties and the houses, which is typically where you have a lot of the problems. But yeah, it'd be nice if Ameren would volunteer to do that.
No,
But-
they used to even pay for the polls. They don't even pay for the polls anymore. So it's tough.
Well, and there was something, I'm not sure if it was this venue or if this was when I lived in Chevy Chase, but we were looking at that. And they were talking about putting the distribution lines along on the front, like along the streets. And then you'd have these green utility boxes. Yeah, up in your grass, which
Yeah.
adds, it takes away one eyesore, but adds
Right.
another one. And then it was kind of a little bit like, well, the eyesore of the distribution lines in the backyard maybe isn't as bad as having a big green box in your, in your front yard.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, yeah.
All right, any other questions on goal G?
Nope, let's move on.
All right, goal H. To promote healthy lifestyles. The goals here are to increase recreational opportunities for all, improve accessibility to and connectivity to parks, trails, and open spaces, as well as increase opportunities for the community to come together. You've seen these goals reflected elsewhere already. It was something that came across very strong from the community output that they have an interest in being a community and having the opportunity to be together. So I was not prepared for that, honestly, like as far as feedback went, just this really, hard desire for cohesion, Five Oaks on Warson, is a huge, and, you know, perhaps because that was under construction during the time, it may have weighed heavily. We certainly have, many trails, or, we have a certain amount of accessibility to boast. There are ways to improve that, and not just for, you know, us, the most easily serviced population. You know, there are ADA standards to work into all of these things that that need to be assessed, how to best provide for everyone and an equitable and inclusive way. You guys aren't that tired, right?
And we are, yeah, and we are blessed because what we have built is meeting all of those, what I would call the ADA accessibility issues, you know, and so our buildings, you know, and what we're doing, you know, is meeting that goal and yeah, go, just say Five Oaks and yeah.
Well, routine trail inventories, assessing your system, and maintaining it. It is a data process, that I enjoy personally, but, it's something, that you can really put out there and that you can, and monitor and track. So the Parks Master Plan, has a lot of those goals in it. So furthering the Parks Master Plan is also part of this goal.
Is there a space already like on the city's website? Maybe I've missed it. Where it has a list of like all the trails, the bike trails, all of that already? If
So
so, what's it under so I can find it?
is there, I know that there is, I know that they're on the parks website, they have at least one, handout that has all the parks locations. As far as where all the trails are, I have a beta, story map.
Jonathan put together a map and it's on the website.
Is it on the, okay, I will look, okay.
Good. I think one thing that's also really good about all of that is the athletic association, you know, with all the teams, the soccer teams, the t-ball teams. And it seems like, you know, some of the adjacent communities to our south that don't have any of these things take advantage of our, I mean, I think it does promote all of that quite a bit, but I mean, we do have you know, a really good, you know, system in place.
We're filling a regional need, you know, it is, talking about a gap analysis as far as services go. We are definitely filling that need and being, you know, that player that has stepped up where other entities have not.
Do we have different price ranges between whether it's an Olivet resident versus somebody else that comes in?
I mean, as far as memberships and things go, but I'm not sure about participation in like team things. There are sometimes reduced prices for residents. I know that I've received reduced prices for my census tract. It's all figured into that's all figured out whenever they create the rate.
Yeah.
And so since they create those rates individually, I can't say that they have, I mean, they probably have
I was just curious because it does seem like there's a lot of people that neighboring communities come and take it, you know, fill teams, you know, with that.
You know, it's been a while to pick up and deal with our recreation department and typically we have had the activities that are for very young kids, kind of like competitive, but
Right.
really non-hardcore competitive kind of stuff.
Starter.
Yeah, and that's where families come to all of that because that's where they get their kids, you know, acclimated to sportsmanship, things of that nature. And then once they get a little older and you had that competitive edge, that's when they kind of went to the bigger, outlets, away from all of that. But with Five Oaks, we don't know what we're gonna have now.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Any other questions?
Let's move on to goal I.
Okay, goal I goes to strengthen environmental sustainability. And again, this was a major component of the RFQ that we wanted the consultants to engage in the three components of the sustainability, both economic, social, and of course, environmental. And this section is what addresses in there. You'll also see throughout the plan, little green leaves that appear on your pages in here that note that these are sustainable type of action steps that could be considered. And you'll see that those run through all the goals in there. So we really integrated, an aspect of sustainability into the process of the comprehensive plan. So we've always talked about, transportation connections and networks, public spaces, community identity, and now, being social or environmental responsive in that planning effort. And I think this will be, one of the significant components in the plan. When they looked at sustainability, they broke it down into three in there, as we talked more specifically about environmental sustainability. One is the built environment that is constructed. Two is the natural environment that where you place what you ever construct is in those surroundings, and then the climate as a whole. And it has a series of goals and and objectives to try to address those three components and along with those actions. We will see this, whether it's through the development of a sustainability plan or through our plan reviews or the questions that the commission asked, like we did at the Audi and talked about what are their sustainable, what are they implementing sustainability within the building and what is their corporate view on that. And that was a pretty neat discussion that they had or engaged in with the commission. We'll also be looking at our codes, and right now we're at the 2015 international code books, which include our international residential code. And now they made significant strides when 2015 was adopted as compared to anything prior to 2009. I think they increased efficiency standards by over 30%. Under the new codes, the 2021, and we'll have 2024 coming out soon, but that 30% went up to 50% compared to 2009. So there's been, some, major improvements that got us to 2015, and then there are other improvements that get us there. But we'll also have to balance that with the cost and how that impacts the area. The other thing we will talk about will be, in our site planning process, we've had this discussion about the trees, protection, preservation, or planting or landscape plans, things that we'll start to engage and look at what is the best suited effort, and whether it's applied to just new construction or it's applied to the community as a whole. And it would be about land protection and what are the processes that the city would take or the community as a whole would take to that. What would be, we do a very good job in terms of maintaining and protecting our public lands. But is the city really ready to go and intervene into private property and require those protections on some of the larger parcels? And at what extent, at what means, and what are how do you balance that out, both between the owner and the community as a whole? We'll have to have that discussion take place or look at means of how to do that. And then, of course, what is our contribution to trying to, make a change or a difference in climate as a whole, whether, again, going back to this tree canopy and maintaining green space, looking at habitable or native plantings and things of that nature that we'll probably start addressing more on a code level process, and then also apply, policy wise as we go through. In there, it's a pretty exciting component in there. There was very strong community support for a lot of action steps to be taken in that process, and I think it gives us a good, clear direction of where we'll probably be going in the next 20 years, and that is something that the region, the nation, and the world as a whole is waking up and trying to address at the same time.
And one thing I really did like the sustainable practice icon that it's scattered throughout.
Yes,
That was a nice touch to highlight, you know.
yes,
all
I
of
think they
those
did a good
items. I
job.
thought-
And to incorporate it in throughout
Exactly.
each and every goal.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that was great.
I would just ask that when we do present this publicly, that if this kind of a document's gonna be out there for people to, you know, pick up and have when they're here at the meeting, I would just like that to be identified at the beginning. I
Mhm.
mean, I know I kept looking at the bottom of this saying sustainability practice, what does that meaning, sustainability practice? And there is a lot of this mark there, and that's good to see. So my comment on that is, let that be known at the beginning.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And then, and
Mhm.
no, all this is already publicly available,
But
informing.
yeah, but even I was confused of what are you meaning by sustainability practice? And so, I mean, it makes sense, but I didn't know. And also all I'm saying is, it is really throughout this document, and just for me, when I'm thinking about the other guy, I think that needs to be a comment in the beginning of your presentation.
As well as the whole chapter that we
Correct,
have, you know,
correct, yeah.
but
Good
it,
points.
it is emphasized throughout the document. Yeah. All right, let's move on.
And then final, the chapter is regarding land use with GoJ about being strategic regarding growth and redevelopment. And that means, you know, continuing to enhance our commercial appearance and encourage efficient, successful growth. Variety of different means to that, but again, there are certain things that we are doing and are in the right direction and received a lot of support from the community as we went through this process. You know, the chapter 428 standards, they don't need to be overhauled, they need to be tweaked. And there, you know, encourage the use of more native plantings. Look at the mass, you know, is 4 stories or 5 stories just really too much, or are there better ways to soften that mass and that appearance, you know, in whether it's within size or height. And there, it talks about, you know, highest and best use and being productive with the land availability that we have. We don't have the big 7-acre parcels along the Olive Boulevard corridor, and we have pretty shallow corridor in there. And, you know, again, not dedicating all that to parking or fast food, you know, and I think our codes already do a good part into that, and that, you know, and trying to encourage the building to help create form and space in that process, working with other agencies to explore funding opportunities, considering smart growth principles. Again, from a planning perspective, those are principles that take into account a lot of the things that we have already in our 2006 comprehensive plan, but, you know, looking at things being mixed use, walkable, multimodal, and having housing components as part of that process in there. And of course, that goes back to the mixed use in there. So that is the highlight of that. There's a lot of community action steps that are noted in there, but I think again, it's being strategic or smart with the process and the availability.
This is great. Was there anybody that had any specific questions or comments on that item? Carol?
I did have one comment
Good.
that related to some of what we were talking about before. And I guess this is kind of a general comment, that each of our goals is not a discrete, independent thing, that that any action that we take is going to touch upon one or two or multiple other aspects of our plan and our goals and our objectives. So it's just a different way of thinking about it, but they're not discrete, independent things. They're the ways, the tools we have to talk about aspects of what we do, but our actions ultimately will be impacting multiple goals. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's
It
Yeah,
re-
I just
more of-
wanted to point that out.
It resembles more of a network map than just a
Yes.
line.
Yeah,
Do you think it would be a good idea to, like, every year kind of go through this, see what we did and see what we want to do, the following year, That way we kind of keep this in mind as, as we go through this whole process or, the 20 years, And I think that could be could be a good reminder for us every year to take a look at it.
Think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, we are furiously writing down the suggestions. Sexy.
I thought nobody liked it, so.
No, I think that's good. I also like the idea, or I think that having a visualization of the network and connectivity between the goals is kind of an interesting thought as well, but just thinking out loud.
Yeah. All right, good.
What we tried to do is summarize each of those goals and the objectives, so the commission has a better understanding. Again, there's a lot of text to these, a lot of guidance and direction that is provided. I think we just tried to highlight the scope of it in there. Now, as preparing through this process, things like trying to figure out an exercise of the commission kind of, and there's just not enough time, but it's like, okay, so Jiffy Lube decides to sell, and how do you apply this plan? How does this plan come into play in there? What is it going to do? What is the direction is it's going to give us? Again, it's not going to control the market, and it's not going to influence who buys that property and what they want to do. But that plan does have repercussions to what would be within our code, what we would try to facilitate, what we would try to not necessarily slow down, but make sure that there's a discussion and an exchange in the process, kind of like a special permit in there, and secure some how do you say it, that it's built with consideration of the values within this plan, regardless of who's in there, because who's in there doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be there for forever. But that streetscape, that easement, those cross connections, the buffers, those will and those can in there. And it's difficult in there. And the intent of this plan, and I hope, in discussions with the public, it's not to control who comes in or who wants to build and all of that. It can't. But it sets our values on how we're going to embrace or welcome them, how they're going to design and build, and what their footprint will leave down the road, whether they're there or not in there. So kind of look at it that way. I was trying to think of something catchy to do, and I thought, Don was going to build Don's Doughy Pizzas right there. She's going to buy the property, and she's going to come to the commission, and she's going to go through a process, so we have chapter 428, and it's going to get revised and tweaked, and there's going to be cross-access easements like the Olive Boulevard Master Plan. There'll be buffer things, there'll be engagement with the community in that process, and it all goes great. Everybody's happy. But in order for her to meet what she's invested, to meet our requirements, she's got to sell a $25 10-inch slice, 10-inch individual pizza.
Right.
And that runs well for a while, and so she's got a really nice public plaza, and she's got indoor seating with a little arcade, so everybody, this was going to be the great family center in there. But at $25 a slice, 5 years from now, Don's just not making it, and she just can't keep. Yeah, so it
Yeah.
closes down, and what do we have left? We still have those improvements that are there for a good while or to forever in there. So Jack, opens Jack's Tacos, and he can sell a taco for $1.25. But in order to keep the open space and that big arcade that Don had and all that seating, he needs to sell a lot of tacos, and he'd do better. You could get 2 tacos at McDonald's and not even get out of the car, for breakfast in the morning, and then Jack needs you to buy like at least 10, per minute to keep it afloat. So he decides to close the arcade. He decides, really, I don't need that parking, and is begging. It's like, I really need a drive-through. I need a drive-through in this process. And ultimately, Jack ends up having to close. And then we see what transfers. Hopefully the building is a high quality, looks good, has this cross access, and can attract something, sizable or to that. And then there's the other vision from the planner side is, again, that's where sometimes incentives work to get us in the table. That could have helped Don, that could have split the cost, extended the cost in there. And it's, how much do you value what you want, and what the quality and the ambiance that is brought in, and are we willing as a community to step up to get to some of that, to make sure it's successful in there. So it's not an ideal way to look at the plan, but I was trying to think.
It's a great example.
How do you?
It's a great
how do you go through
example.
this
Yeah, that's
process?
fabulous. That's great.
In there, but think about that, this is our document that will lead how we make those type of choices, and how we're going to engage with these different individuals. It's not going to tell us what's going to come in,
Right.
but it will impact the space and the what we see.
It kind of highlights too the unintended consequences that happen with some of these things, and I fear that sometimes, especially when we're trying to push for is the environmental sustainability with a lot of things that tends to increase the cost. And we're also trying to keep our housing market low, or, or cost effective. We kind of run, against each other with that. And I think in our vision, the balanced economy, I mean, the whole thing needs to be a balance. And I don't think you can turn around and make Dawn's Pizza? Or no, it was Don's Pizza. Yeah. I mean, it almost has to be like a gradual process. And, but my dad in business, used to always tell me, you can't turn an ocean liner on a dime. But you got to start turning. And you gradually do it. And then once you start making that turn, you can't stop it either, because it's already turning, and it builds on each other. So.
I wanna bring one more point to this, because Carlos kind of brought it up, that we've been kind of growing up here together. Prior to Carlos coming here, this city did not have a planner. And the one thing that I learned, while someone wanted to turn him into the parks director at one time, uh, you can't, a city cannot survive with knowing what is the best to do, or what is good practices, professional practices, without a city planner. And this city has elevated itself from my beginnings of one individual to how many's in your department now, Carlos?
There's the 3 of us, and
And then his
one
staff of inspectors. So, in all fairness, the city has to, embrace what is necessary, going forward as well. And that, slow investment in enhancing our planning department and our economic development, goals has just been, it's taken 20 years. And to be sitting here and talking about this next level of the strategic plan, this vision is very different from what the people wanted, almost 20 years ago. I mean, look, that was 0506, and we're in 24 now. So this is really good. I get excited about these things. You all know I love planners, and this is a wonderful thing. And to see that the mindfulness moving forward is with regards to sustainability, and you've all heard me say, and the people that are listening tonight have often heard me say, I'm interested in social sustainability. You want to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is more than just green earth. And to see that all these things are being molded in consideration for this next 20-year chapter, to me is really beautiful. It really is. But with regard to your remark about, building environmental, Tammy's building Greg's house.
Right.
And I know some of the headaches. Matter of fact, I know all of the headaches. No, we're not. But it's kind of like somebody has to push. Somebody has to be there, be that example. And as I have said, even to Greg, you're bringing things to the forefront, and you have the ability to do that. And this is good. But, when I go to the ULI things and other things that are put on by the professionals, this is still, as you say, something that is hard to embrace beyond the commercial market.
Right.
And so, yes, baby steps here. And I want to acknowledge that Greg Carl, is attempting to bring, he'd love to bring the whole world into where
Right.
he is, but it's baby steps. And it takes, someone like that. And like, my spouse who is willing to continually, go back and try to find that answer and get to that next step and that next step. But, building a house that could take 2 or 3 years is not, as you say, economically feasible, when you're a home builder and people have to sit there and say, what is my final cost? As you've heard me all argue before, I want more brick. I want, the house is going to be there a while, and they can sit there and complain about the cost of brick. They're complaining about the cost of brick, and yet we want to push environmental, other things that you can do environmentally in the home. We'll get there, but it will take the public itself to embrace this better and for the industry to bring the cost of these things down and, the leveling the change. Yesterday you can do this, but today you can do this. But tomorrow you're going to be able to sit there and connect your switches through low electrical stuff, whatever it's
Low
called.
voltage.
Thank you, through low voltage. Well, that's going to be something that's going to be more common, maybe 2, 3, or 4 years down the road. But most people don't know that now.
Right.
And even St. Louis County doesn't know all this. And you got to get the bigger partners to embrace and be willing to be a part of this, because we don't do all of our inspections. There are portions that every municipality gives to St. Louis County. And it took a long time for St. Louis County to get back up to the codes that we were attempting to follow. So, I mean, when you talk about these things, why am I putting this out there? Because there's people that don't really, they haven't lived it to understand, yes, that's a great vision, but it's baby steps to get there.
Right.
And this is a 20-year goal, and I can see this being a successful 20-year goal.
I agree. I think it's well said.
All right.
All right. Any other further discussions on this? Seeing none, let's move on to the next agenda item. All right.
Right. Not that it requires any decisions now, but I did look at this year's schedule.
Mhm.
And noted a couple of things in there, like our second meeting in March will be during the Ladue School District spring break in there. So, what helps me and to assist also, any applicants and petitioners is to let them know as far as in advance as I can. But we'll probably have talks about this in February and see who will be available in that, or if we need to reschedule or change that date. And there, I also looked at Hazelwood and Passover. They'll impact April 18th in there. So keep that in mind. And then as we get further into the year in October, Rosh Hashanah is early, and I need some guidance on whether we would have or conduct that meeting. And then in January of 2025, Hanukkah has its last day. So we'll send you a list of that schedule, and then again, probably February, kind of talk about that March and the spring break and get some guidance from the commission. I know for my son, who's part of Ferguson Florissant, they're the following week on March 28th. So, but we do have ample staff here to facilitate that. So
Good.
let me know. All right.
I mean, shifting, with some of those weeks, I think might be something we could consider. Shifting it to, instead of first and third, we do first and second, or, if we got the conflict in the beginning, we do second and third or something like that.
Okay.
And I think it's also going to depend on, how many petitions, that we have. to consider, because hopefully we can find a good quiet period and have our own PCDC spring break.
And I personally don't see any issues with December with regard to Hanukkah. You know, it's not even, yeah, not even a part of your dates.
Well, this,
The last day would be the first
January
meeting in
2nd.
January. But that's still a year away.
Still, that is not a
Yeah.
high holiday. It's not a high.
Oh, I see. I see.
All right.
All right, good, good. Okay, so move on to meeting minutes. I see before us, there is the meeting minutes from December 7th, 2023. Will somebody acknowledge receipt of these? Oh, there's two. Thank you for checking. December 7th and December 21st. Well done. Well done, Jack. All right.
I will acknowledge receipt of the meeting minutes on for December 7th and December 21st, 2023.
So acknowledged. If anybody has any questions or comments related to those, please address them to Jen. All right. All right, we'll move on to reports.
Outside of that, we'll be in discussions with Shockey Consulting to see when we get the full draft report finalized. It's about over 140 pages or so. And of course, you've seen just the framework. The rest of it is the descriptions or findings and things of that nature that would be from the consultant's perspective in there. So we hope to get that before your meeting on the 18th. If not, the intent of that meeting on the 18th is to present to you the final draft, have an overview with the public and allow for public comments, and then continue that into February to give, if there were concerns or people wanted more opportunities to read through the document, that they would
Good, good.
in that process. And really that is, given the time, that's the main item I wanted to note.
Good, good. That's great.
Carlos, if we get that ahead of time, will it be like a paper, like packet? Will we come pick it up? Like, I'm just curious how that works.
It's,
Or will it be in an
I leave it to
email?
preference. What I'll send
Okay.
an email, and then if anybody would like us to print out
Okay.
an individual packet. I know like Carol prefers paper. We'll be glad.
Laura prefers paper.
Yeah, we'll be glad to.
And now, I know that you're on my way home as well, so I can drop off Carol and yours. Okay.
Good, good. Okay, Missy?
Carlos does a really good job of giving you your summaries here. We do have coffee with the mayor January 10th, and the guest is going to be your city council. And we are really gonna, a part of it's gonna be talking about, the accomplishments of this year. And as I mentioned, I want to talk about the accomplishments of 20 years, and where we're at. But it's going to be the council along with the mayor, and it'll be interesting. Would hope to see folks there, and beyond that, nothing else to report.
Good, good. That's great. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll adjourn at 9:03. Thanks, everybody.
Second. Did I stop it?
Yeah, just click the end.
Good night.
Good night, Carol.